All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And Ted, thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, we did grow up on the same street. I was a lot, and I guess I still am, a lot older than Ted was. And so he was that guy that hung out with my little brother and little sister. But yeah, we had good memories back then. It is an honor to come back to this group, and gosh, I didn't realize I was the only one that had been invited back, so makes me a little bit nervous to try and live up to last year. We'll do our best, but I love this group because it's all about getting people to be investors. I mean, I remember talking the last couple of years to people afterwards about how they get started and heard some of their origin stories in real estate. So I think anytime you could get an organization that helps people get a part of the American dream and become landlords, how cool is that? So it's an honor to be with you, and we're going to get started. On the screen in front of you is a picture of me with my co-host and co-owner of Grow Omaha Media, Trenton Magid, and we founded this company 18 and a half. We founded this company. All right, are we good now? Okay, so we founded this company about 18 and a half years ago, and it was always just kind of a radio show at first, in which we did it because it was marketing for us and for our real estate practice, and then the missionary component of it was to help make Omaha a better place and get people excited about it. Well, about 2 years ago, we turned it into a serious business, and we call it Grow Omaha Media. At any rate, a few little pieces of information about that, first of all. All righty, there you go. Actually, let's go there. Okay, these are our sponsors. Not that we expect you to memorize them, but we always appreciate their help and service and all that sort of thing. And then, I don't think we're clicking very well. Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. For some reason, it clicks. Do I need to point it somewhere? Okay, point it there. All right. Okay, so the radio show itself broadcasts Saturday mornings at 9:06 to be exact on News Radio 1110 KFAB, and we talk about Omaha growth and development, real estate news, construction news, and a lot of different business news. And then we also have our newsletter, which is emailed every Thursday afternoon. We currently have more than 14,000 people who receive that. If you would like to get it, all you have to do is go to growomaha.com, and you can register your name there, or you can send an email to news@growomaha.com, and we'll make sure you get on the list. And so what we're going to do today is go through a few different projects. I do a lot of these Grow Omaha overview talks, and I found this is the best format. We go over some of the big things that have happened in the marketplace lately, and then we open it up for questions. And we usually have a ton of questions. People want to know about big projects or ideas, or, basically sometimes people will say, I think we should have this in town, or whatever the case may be. So we're going to do that. And if you've been paying attention to the news at all this year, you know you have to start out with this. We always say in Grow Omaha we have two kinds of red meat that really get our listeners and readers excited. One is skyscrapers, and those happen about once every 20 years. And the other one would be new restaurants and retailers, which happen every week. So we've been waiting for the skyscraper thing for a long time. Mutual of Omaha had that announcement come out in January that they were going to build a major office tower downtown on the side of the old W. Dale Clark Library. Well, about a month ago, Mutual and its developer, Lanahaw Development, finally released an accurate rendering. The first one was just kind of a conceptual thing that came out last winter. Now they came out with an accurate rendering. They know the specs. It's going to be 800,000 square feet, 44 stories, 677 feet tall. And since skyscrapers are one of the two red meat topics that we have on Grow Omaha, I'm just not going to gloss over this. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this today, okay? So this is what it looks like if you're standing in the brand new Jean Leahy Mall. And then check this out. This next picture is what it would look like when you're driving on Abbott Drive coming from the airport to downtown. Definitely changes the skyline. So this is going to be kind of fun. A couple people I know or know of made some amateur photographs or renderings of what it might look like. Now this one is just a placeholder for the building, but this is looking from left field of Charles Schwab Field. And how cool will that look when people are watching the College World Series on television? Of course, I would like to get a rendering with the actual building instead of just a rectangular box, but we'll work on that. And then this is what it would look like potentially when driving in on Interstate 29 on the north side of Council Bluffs, heading close to Interstate 480. This is what it would look like from River's Edge Park in Council Bluffs. And this is what it might look like when you were over by Harrah's Casino in Council Bluffs, looking to the west. So let's have even a little bit more fun with this. And so, you know, a lot of people are thinking, okay, 677 feet, that's pretty tall. How does that compare? So we put together a couple lists for you today. The first one is, there we go, the tallest buildings in Nebraska. So when it's built, it'll be the tallest building in Nebraska. And you can see the existing tall buildings in the state are, first of all, right here, the top two are in downtown Omaha, the First National Tower at 634 feet, the Woodman Tower at 478, the State Capitol building in Lincoln at 400 feet, and then the Elmwood Tower, that's, some people refer to it as Masonic Manor. That's the one that's in the Elmwood Park, UNO area, and then two other downtown buildings, the Union Pacific headquarters and what used to be the First National headquarters before they built this thing in the early 2000s. So that's pretty cool. So then some people who are into skyscrapers as red meat, like we are on Grow Omaha, might like to look a little further out. And so I thought, okay, well, how would this compare with the tallest buildings in some of the cities in our region? Well, it doesn't stack up very well to Chicago. I'll just be honest with you right there. I almost didn't even put them on the list, but there they are. Minneapolis has one at 792. Denver has one at 714. Then comes the Mutual of Omaha Tower. And then if you look at, St. Louis, Des Moines, Kansas City, St. Paul, Wichita, it'll actually be the tallest building in a multi-state region. Now, this one is going to be the last skyscraper slide I share with you, but I think this one's the most fun of them all. Here is a list of cities who have tallest buildings that will be shorter than the Mutual of Omaha Tower when it's completed in 2026. And those are, surprisingly, the one right behind it is Tulsa, Oklahoma, which a lot of people don't think of Tulsa, but they have a really tall building there. But Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Milwaukee, Washington, D.C., a lot of major cities. So that's kind of fun. But that's not the only project that we have going on in the area. Since we're downtown, it's appropriate that we talk about the new streetcar. And the streetcar system has in many ways been tied to the Mutual of Omaha headquarters. The idea was Mutual would be more apt to bring its employees from midtown to downtown if it knew that there was this connectivity, because they would be abandoning, so to speak, the midtown campus, where, if you recall, they invested hundreds of millions of dollars 10 years ago on Midtown Crossing. And they didn't necessarily want to orphan Midtown Crossing, so they thought if that streetcar is going through there, there's a higher likelihood that their current headquarters, soon to be their old headquarters, could be redeveloped into something special. Meanwhile, they also felt that some of their more urban dwelling employees might be able to take that streetcar to work. Meanwhile, again, Omaha planners and business interests have been talking about a streetcar system in earnest for about 5 to 10 years now. In fact, you can even go back to when Hal Daub was mayor in the 90s. There was talk about doing a streetcar system that would connect downtown to the Henry Doorly Zoo. So this idea of the streetcar has been around for a long time, and we're lucky here in that some major concentrations of activity, of density, of cool real estate developments all happen to be in a line. You've got downtown, then you got that Midtown Crossing, Midtown Blackstone area, then you have the Med Center, which is the largest concentration of jobs in the state. So we are quite fortunate that that kind of all ties together. This should start construction next year, and it will be completed in 2026. So 2026 will be a big year for downtown. This is scheduled to open, and the skyscraper for Mutual of Omaha is scheduled to open as well. Some other projects that I'm going to point out before we open it up for discussion. At the west terminus of the future streetcar system is the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and we are still of the belief that a project known as Project Next will happen in that area. This would be a $3 billion construction project. In fact, if you drive by the Med Center area right now, and you go to the corner of Saddle Creek Road and Farnham Street, on the southeast corner, the old Monroe Meyer Institute is mostly gone now. There was also an elementary school for kids with disabilities that had long closed. That's gone. Major demolition going in that area. That's where the Project Next will go. So if you're looking at this picture, and this is just very conceptual right now, the Med Center is not committed that this will be it. But from this picture, we are standing kind of on the northwest corner of Farnham and Saddle Creek, and we're looking to the southeast. In fact, right there is the existing Buffett Cancer Center, which is already there. This is what is all being torn down right now. So the plan right now would be to build this massive building. Guess how big this is going to be? Like 3 million square feet. We're talking about 2 to 3 million square feet. It would instantly, when it's built, be probably the biggest building in the state of Nebraska, I would imagine, unless they build it in phases and it's multiple buildings. But let's call it one building, and let's call it the biggest building in the state. And the estimation is that about 8,700 people would work in this new building. So an additional 8,700 jobs over the course of the next 10 years after this is started would be at the Med Center, which, like I said earlier, is already the biggest concentration of jobs in our state. And when they first started talking about this 4 years ago, the median salary was projected to be $75,000 a year. A lot has happened with wage increases and, more significantly, inflation. So we could imagine that those salaries will probably be a heck of a lot more than $75,000 when this is finally built. When is it going to be started? We don't know. Much of what has to happen at the federal level to do this has happened. So that's really good. And Omaha has been named one of 5 sites in the United States that will have major biohazard preparedness facilities, which will be a big part of this. This will also be a working hospital to expand the Med Center med-surg facilities. So let's keep an eye on this. Very exciting, going to have a profound impact on the entire metropolitan area, but particularly on urban Omaha. That midtown, downtown area, the UNO-Exarban area, it's going to really have a particularly big impact on that part of town. Part of the project will be an administration building for Nebraska Medicine. And so now this building is standing where we were standing in the previous slide. So in this slide, we were standing on the northwest looking at the southeast. Now we're standing on top of the new Project Next building and looking to the northwest. Now, I do have some bad news for you, though. I've been told this building has been shrunk down to 7 stories instead of this big one. Instead of the parking garage, like there's a bunch of parking underneath it, I'm told that parking has been slid over in the building. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but it'll still be a cool building. And check this out. This is what's called a lid, where you actually take a big structure and put it over a street or a freeway, and you build kind of like a mini park on it, landscaping and all that sort of thing. Call it a lid. There will actually be another lid that is planned to go over Interstate 80 between Dodge and Harney Street down the road. So that'll be really cool. The cars will go underneath that, but if you wanted to walk from the admin building over to Project Next, you would just walk where these fake people are right now, and you would say, oh my gosh, the flowers in the yard are so nice. Okay, this is the Kiewit Luminarium, which is a $100 million project that is wrapping up on the riverfront. It's on Lewis and Clark Landing, And if you've been tracking this, you know that big efforts have been made to spruce up the riverfront. In fact, who here has been to the new Jean Leahy Mall since it opened? Okay, a lot of people have. If you haven't, go check it out. It is night and day different from what it was. They even have like games and programming and music, like yoga outside, and they're going to have things planned for the winter. It's a pretty cool deal. But that's one of only 3 parks. This $300 million project is taking, and almost all of it privately funded, by the way, Jean Leahy Mall, Heartland of America Park, and Lewis and Clark Landing all together. It's being professionally managed by the same organization, Mecca, which manages the baseball stadium and the CHI Health Center, Convention Center, and Arena. So in other words, it's not a hellhole like the old Jean Leahy Mall was with trash floating in the lagoon and all that. This is maintained by people who are big-time entertainment administrators. It's awesome. And there's a 10-year agreement with Mecca to care for these parks and to program these parks. Very cool. Heartland of America will open up this summer of 2023, and Lewis and Clark will open at the same time. This Kiewit Luminarium sits on Lewis and Clark Landing. The building is about done, at least the outside of it is. But it will be a massive science, technology, engineering, and mathematics museum. And it's my understanding that it'll probably draw people from hundreds of miles, kind of like how Henry Dorley Zoo does. Okay, we're nearing the end of prepared remarks, but I do want to talk about the big data centers that continue to be under construction. If you were at my presentation last year, we met at Anthony's, I put this exact same slide up there because Google was building a big facility at, Schramm Road and 144th Street, also known as Highway 50 in Sarpy County. Well, that's coming along. They keep expanding it, but that's not all. Now, Google is building a huge data center at State Street and Highway 133, the Blair High Road in Northwest Omaha. And that was announced as about a 250 acre project. We're now getting intel, even though this has not been publicly announced, that is expanding to 1,000 acres in that area. So it'll just be absolutely crazy. Meanwhile, Google has $3 billion already sunk into a facility in Council Bluffs on the east side of I-29, kind of on the southeast corner of the Council Bluffs area. They had stopped working on that a couple of years ago. I just found out that construction bids are going out. They're going to double that. They have 1,000 acres over there too. So we should see, hundreds of millions to billions of dollars of Google construction in the next 5 to 10 years in the metro area. There's no reason to suspect that'll slow down at all. Now, think about the Google campus of our 3 Google campuses, the one in Sarpy County. Immediately to the south of it is Facebook. I showed this slide at last year's program as well. Facebook keeps growing and growing and growing. They had the first segment, which was on the northwest corner of, Cape Hart Road and Highway 50 in Papillion. And that was, I think, a couple million square feet and about $1 billion. Then they built about the identical thing on the east side, and they built a bridge connecting them over the highway. We talked about that last year. Now they're building on the southwest corner of that intersection, and they're working on the 9th building. Facebook has not yet announced this, but they are grading hundreds of additional acres to the south and west of that. They're not stopping. So I don't know what this means for the future of the Highway 50 corridor, other than to tell you, for the time being, there's a hell of a lot of data center space. And if you look, when you drive around that area, there's all these power substations because they need such incredible amounts of power. And good luck finding an electrician to work for you, because they're all working on Google and Facebook right now. So this is the end of my prepared remarks. That just kind of gets you started. The real purpose of the presentation is now. And this is where we're going to open it up for questions. In fact, a few times a year on our radio show, we have what we call the call-in show. We normally never take calls, but a few times a year we do. And that's when we let anyone call in I have to go through a screener, of course, and they can ask their questions on the air. Well, this is going to be kind of like a live in-person Grow Omaha call-in show. So if you want to talk about a project, if you're wondering about something, if you have an opinion about Omaha growth and development, if you want my opinion on something, the floor is open, it's all fair game, and who is going to be the first person to ask a question? Well, we know who that is. It's Ted.
Okay, so the question is, I heavily invest in South Omaha, and I've been really excited about two separate things. First off was the sports complex going in off of, was that 27th?
Yeah, between Martha and Vinton.
Yep,
Yeah.
so that's my first question. And then also the orbit system. There's rumors of it going up and down 24th from north to South Omaha.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great questions, Ted. First of all, the sports complex is dead, and that's too bad because this was going to be a very impressive urban multi-sports complex. It was going to be right along the east side of Interstate 480, north of Vinton, south of Martha, soccer fields, all sort of climbing stuff, zip lines, really, really cool thing, major investment. And the group apparently was serious about it that was behind it. It was a nonprofit group. To the best of my knowledge, had nothing to do with the city, other than maybe the city would cooperate with some infrastructure stuff, but really nothing to do with the city. And they bought up a bunch of houses, and now it's gone. It's dead. They decided they couldn't do it. It wasn't feasible. And so now I don't think you will see that there. And that's a shame because that would have been a real nice amenity right in the heart of our city and an older part of the city. Now, not that it's anywhere near there, but there are a couple other major mega sports complexes under development. One of them is the Nebraska Multi-Sports Complex in La Vista's Southport East area. That's partly open already. And there's many more to come. It's an insanely large number of soccer fields, all artificial turf. And then there's going to be one that's going to be a little more baseball, softball centric in Valley at Highway 275. And let's call it, if I'm remembering correctly, about 264th Street. You know where, if you go out there, there's an exit that has a Dairy Queen and a Pilot, a truck stop. It's going to be right to the northwest of that. Huge, and that's just getting started. Elkhorn Athletic Association is behind that. But let's go back to Ted's question about South Omaha. Part two was the Orbit system. Orbit is our bus rapid transit system that runs up and down Dodge between downtown and the West Roads, right? Well, Metro Area Transit is now studying the second possible Orbit line, and they're looking at 24th Street. This would be really cool. It would start just south, if it happens, it's not for sure, but it would start just south of Old South Omaha, so let's say 24th and Q. It would go up there all the way through the near south side, into downtown Omaha by Joslin, Creighton University, 24th and Lake, and about that area it would jog over to 30th. It might actually jog over to 30th, maybe a little bit south of there, I'm not sure, and then go all the way up through North 30th Street, and it would probably either terminate at Metro Community College Fort Omaha campus or possibly even go all the way up to Florence. We'll see how that plays out. I think there's a good chance that'll happen. The first Orbit has been pretty successful so far, which is cool when you consider that it opened during the middle of the pandemic and all that. And so I think it'll probably happen. And if that is the case, watch out for 24th Street and watch out for North 30th Street. There's going to be a lot of investment along that area. All you have to do is look at what is already happening on the Dodge corridor, partly because of Orbit. You've got an apartment building under construction just east of Methodist and Children's Hospitals. You've got a lot more on the way. I think you're going to see major density increases along Dodge. You've got a 320-unit apartment building planned for 48th and Dodge. I doubt anyone would be building something that massive right on Dodge were it not for Orbit. Now, at the risk of taking this answer way too long, here I go anyway. I think there's a decent chance that we might even also have additional streetcar spurs. So the first streetcar, like we said, will be downtown out to the Med Center. There's talk that maybe another streetcar route someday could be, from Epley Airport, down Abbott Drive, 10th Street, and then go down to the zoo either on 10th Street or on 13th Street. I think there's a decent chance that happens if the streetcar through Midtown on the Farnham-Harney corridor is as successful as we think. I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen. So great way to start us off, Ted. Now, who is going to ask the next question? And we have someone approaching the mic.
Hey, what's going on? My name's Travis. I got two questions for
Okay.
you. In your opinion, why do you think there's such an interest from these big companies in Omaha to have their data processing centers or whatever the case may be? And then two, in your personal opinion, what do you think it's going to do to the median home price of Omaha when these are completed and people start to move here?
Great questions, Travis. Thank you. So when you talk about the big companies, you're probably talking about Facebook and Google and all that sort of thing. Few reasons why those companies have come here in particular. From the data center perspective, they love Omaha for a couple reasons. One, public power. OPPD does an outstanding job of keeping electricity rates low and reasonable. They're very reliable. We don't have the rolling blackouts that places like California has. We don't have the capacity problems that Texas has been dealing with lately. And so our power is super, super reliable. The other thing is that we have cold weather for 40% of the year. Data centers love cold weather because those computers, those millions of computers that Google and Facebook own in the metro area generate a hell of a lot of heat. And so there's about 40 or 50% of the year where it's either cold or cool here, and they can suck that air. Like if there's a day that gets down to zero, those data center managers are like giddy. They're so happy. So that's part of it. The next reason is that high-tech companies from the Bay Area started getting involved here years and years ago. And the reason they did back then was there was a lot of telephone, telecom, and early tech presence here because of Offutt Air Force Base. Well, they came here, they liked it. And so you had companies like PayPal, which at one point employed 3,000 people here. They've pared back a little bit, but still a ton of people here in Omaha. And they love the workforce here. They did great. LinkedIn recently opened a 1,000 person office that is like state of the art, one of the best offices in the world for LinkedIn. They have 1,000 employees here. So we've always had this good concentration of tech people that goes back to the Offutt Air Force Base days and the telecom days, which has helped create that. Okay, your second question, Travis, median home prices. I believe they will continue to go up. I recently did a keynote address at an NP Dodge program, and all indications are from the people that they brought in for speakers that are experts in the residential real estate market said Omaha should continue to see value growth. Will we have something like a recession in the next year or two? Can't imagine we won't. I'd be surprised if we don't, but there are still a few things that remain true. Omaha has a housing shortage. Omaha's population is growing. Omaha is doing some blockbuster developments and job creating things. So, you might have a quarter where housing prices don't grow much in the next couple of years, but I wouldn't be surprised if you don't even have that. So, in fact, there was a study that came out that we publicized on Grow Omaha that identified Omaha as that Omaha will be the third fastest home value growth market in the United States in the next calendar year. Well, from third quarter this year to third quarter next year. Interestingly, Lincoln, Nebraska was number one. Yeah. So yeah, your values should continue to go up, and unless there's something like unforeseeably horrible that happens, God forbid. Okay, good questions. Who is the next? Oh, we have a person approaching a microphone.
Okay, I'm already loud, so. I just have a question. I work with a lot of investors, and trying to get them to invest right now has been near to impossible. I find what they want, and then they back out. Mm-hmm. So how do I convince them that Omaha is the market? I mean, a lot what you have said, but there's houses in Dundee that I know would be great Airbnbs for doctors, and and I just can't convince them to invest.
Good question. Couple thoughts come to mind. Part of it could be the general nervousness we're seeing from investors, not only in real estate, but in all sectors of the business world right now, because we did have 2 negative growth quarters earlier this year. We have seen interest rates increase incredibly in the last year, although historically they're still quite reasonably priced, but compared to what we're used to, it's a big, big shock to the system. And if you talk to most economists, they are projecting some sort of economic problems in the next 2 years. I don't know how we don't, right? Because we flooded trillions of dollars of imaginary money into the economy while this brewing talent shortage kind of crested, even though it's been a problem for the last 10 years. And you had these pandemic effects on the global supply chain. I don't know how you don't have anything like that happen. So I'm planning on a little bit of an economic downturn in the next couple of years. So that's your first problem. The second problem might be completely non-real estate related, and it might be completely non-Omaha related. And that could be, are you talking to the right ones? Are you hitting them at the right time? Do you have to play with the messaging a little bit? And I don't know that, because obviously we don't know each other, but that would be a possibility too. You know, like is there a different target audience of investors that might be worth reaching out to? So, sure.
Just out of curiosity, I live in Fremont, and the mayor there is doing an awesome job of growing Fremont. So can you come to Fremont and help us grow Fremont?
You know, we do cover Fremont. Technically, we say Grow Omaha covers the combined metropolitan statistical area of Omaha. And that is the 8 counties that make up the primary Omaha metro area, plus Dodge County. This is all determined by the U.S. Census Bureau, what is a metro area and what's a combined statistical area. So we do technically cover Fremont and Grow Omaha, so we occasionally put some Fremont stories in there when we can get our hands on them. A lot of times we don't get Fremont information very easily. Thank you for the question. We have another person.
On a show, I don't know, it's been quite a while ago, you mentioned major changes to 480 that were just drawings. Is there any update on that?
Yeah, good question. There is an urban core plan that was produced by a group of civic leaders. The Greater Omaha Chamber and the City of Omaha was involved. And it kind of talked about what can we do with the urban core. When I was talking about that freeway lid on Interstate 480, that was part of the plan. And in general, it's encouraging more density and job creation. There's this 30-30-30 thing where they want to get 30,000 more residents downtown before 2030 or something like that. And there's something else with 30. But so there's all of that happening right now. But what you're talking about in particular, there's this early stage idea. I don't even know if it's a proposal yet that would say, let's say you're coming in to Omaha from Council Bluffs on Interstate 480. You'd come over the river, and right about by the Hilton Hotel, instead of it staying on a viaduct, Interstate 480 would have a down ramp, go onto surface level, and be like a 6-lane divided road with landscaping at the surface, you know, more like a 25, 35 mile per hour surface area. And then when you get close to Central High School, it'd ramp back up onto Interstate 480. So if you're wanting to fly by downtown quickly, you would hate that idea. But if you want to see the north downtown area developed more and have downtown proper and NoDo better connected, you might love that idea. And there are some cities that do some things like this. I have mixed emotions on it. Part of it is kind of exciting to me because that interstate does take up a lot of developable land there. And I like that idea, but I'm also one of those persons that hates any connectivity to go away, because I like cities to have maximum connectivity. So I don't currently have an opinion on that project. Either way, I can't imagine it's anything we're going to have to worry about in the next 5 to 10 years. It's probably a long-term project. Good question, though. All right, we have another person approaching the mic.
So yeah, I have 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
So first one, do you know anything about the Crossroads development? What's going on there? Should I ask the next question now, or should I?
Yeah, you can. Well, here I'll just answer the Crossroads one first. To the best of my knowledge, everything is full speed ahead with the Crossroads project. I think we can all assume that it will not open in 2024 when it was originally projected. My guess is that the developer, Lockwood Development, very capable, very good, strong development company with a great track record in this town, is probably encountering some difficulties with supply chain issues, inflation, rising interest rates, talent shortages, and potential recession. The same stuff that we're all worried about, right? So my guess is that gets delayed a couple of years, completion at least. But when you drive by, they've been working on it lately. A lot of sewer and groundwork. So I'm very excited about that project. I had heard that there was a company that, and I heard it from a great source, but I can't necessarily verify that it was 100% true, but that there was a significant local company thinking about putting a 12-story office building there. I've also heard subsequently that that company is going to stay remote. So on that building, which is too bad, because how cool would that have looked? But they're planning for hundreds of apartments, some office space, hotel, some condos, a lot of entertainment, retail, restaurant, bar, that type of space. Should be very nice.
Awesome. So just like you talking about all these developments that are going on, I can't help but to think about, like North Omaha and South Omaha, the historically underinvested communities. And so working with the Department of Economic Development, I've seen like how they've been trying to funnel like money back into it, but it seems tough because of just like how the dynamics of the city are. And so what's your perspective on just like how these investments might funnel through? And I know like, they're building apartment complexes and, they're trying to, build transportation, but it's more so seen for like, the new employees of these companies that might be end up pushing the people there out. So like, what's your perspective on that? And like, how do you think we might be able to mitigate some of that? Yeah.
Great question. That has been a constant struggle. When you have parts of town that are economically lagging behind others, there creates a lot of social issues and complicated economic issues. South Omaha is further ahead than North Omaha right now because we're seeing quite a bit of investment in the South 24th Street corridor. The old Stockyards project was huge. The zoo is in South Omaha, Interstate 80 and the Kennedy Freeway run through it. On the north side, you are seeing some encouraging things like the Highlander project on North 30th Street. And some of the things that might have some longer term benefit for the northeast quadrant could be some new industrial buildings that are underway right now. There's about a 67,000 square foot, which is not terribly big, but enough to make a difference. Industrial building planned for just a little bit kind of northwest of Carter Lake. And then we do have a couple of major industrial buildings going along the Stores Expressway, although those are more of like an Epley area sort of thing, but at least it's something a little bit on the north side. I think the Orbit route, if it actually happens on the North 30th and the North 24th Street corridors, will be a huge benefit for growth in that area. And then I think the other thing we can do is, can we create some sort of incentives for developers to do what oftentimes are seen as risks by putting better retail in some of the northeast and southeast parts of town? I think that's one of the things that has frustrated a lot of people. For instance, Walmart opened at 50th and Ames years ago. That was a battle to make that happen. That was years in the making. We need more national retailers in that quadrant, and it's not easy to do. And so, can the city, can the state come up with some sort of incentives and sweeteners beyond TIF that could make some of those retailers go there? It's probably going to take some pretty cool developments and all that, but it is an area of frustration because both of those areas do lag behind the rest of the city. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, with the current housing market being really, really down in how many houses are around. Do you think there's going to be any surprising areas where people are going to start building more dense residential areas so far?
That's a great question. I think the answer would be yes. I mean, if you look at single-family housing construction right now, you've got a couple of nodes where it's really intense, right? You got a little bit down in Bellevue, you got some down in Papillion, you've got some out in Gretna, and then there's this huge swath between Bennington and Elkhorn where you're seeing heavy, heavy single-family construction. What I find interesting is, when will we get the suburban development out far enough where people say, screw that, I'm not driving that far to everything? And if you go back to the northeast quadrant, like the previous question, there are a lot of empty lots in northeast Omaha where houses fell into disrepair, maybe they caught on fire, they were abandoned, whatever the case may be, they had to be condemned and torn down. There are areas that are not very far from downtown Omaha that have more empty lots in them than they have occupied lots. Do we get to a point where you start to see some single-family sprinkle development in some of those neighborhoods? Or are there some neighborhoods that you go out a little bit further, say from a Benson or some on the south side that are really ripe for redevelopment, that you could see some growth there? Oh, and that reminds me of something else you mentioned. What's your name, sir? What is it? Jake. Okay. You mentioned something along the lines of gentrification. In other words, driving people out of certain low-income areas when you have a whole bunch of development. That's going to happen. I think gentrification is an unfortunate part of a city's growth and development, and I don't see how some of that does not happen. Because if you bring a whole bunch of new investment into one particular area, the rents have to go up, the sale prices have to go up. Now, here in Omaha, there are some incentives to do some affordable housing with market rate housing in multifamily buildings, but we're going to see what happens with some of the single family stuff. But yeah, I'm going to be fascinated to see where it grows. I guess one other thought on that: if you go straight north of the northeast quadrant, say north of Interstate 680, but east of 72nd Street, you're in the Ponca Hills. And generally speaking, the Ponca Hills have always been declared undevelopable because they're very, very steep, and it would be extremely expensive to run sewers up in that area. So that's why you never saw a lot of neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood like you see in the other parts of the suburban frontier. Okay, do we ever get to a point where some of the stuff in Elkhorn and Gretna is getting, in Papillion, is getting so far out that maybe little parts of the Ponca Hills are developed someday? That would upset a lot of people in the Ponca Hills, I know that. Okay, great question so far. I bet we have another one. All right, familiar face approaching the microphone.
Yeah, to continue the conversation I was asking earlier, and a little bit off what you said, with the orbit system, if it does expand out, will there be incentives like TIF or other programs that the city will put around that? And did they do that with the last orbit system on Dodge?
You know, the TIF is just designed or declared by boundaries. The city has to declare an area blighted and substandard, which is kind of easy to do because there have been some areas that have been declared blighted that kind of make people go, huh? Kind of like Old Mill when they wanted to build a TD Ameritrade building. So yes, we can do a lot to get TIF boundaries created. But to be honest with you, Ted, I'm thinking South 24th Street, North 24th Street, North 30th, it probably already almost all is TIF eligible right now. Now, one of the cool things, though, from a development perspective that happens with those streetcar lines is there's this new thing in the city code which says if a multifamily building is constructed within so many blocks of the streetcar line, they will actually do a lower parking requirement. So if it's normally X number of parking stalls per 1,000 square feet of building space, in those special streetcar zones, you can go a lot less than that. And that will get us some of the density that we need to have in Omaha to keep the city strong and healthy. Not to get too wordy, which I'm prone to do in these types of discussions, but Omaha, the city of Omaha, will bump up against the natural boundaries of its expansion. It can't grow to the south because there's the Sarpy County line. It can't grow to the east. There's a river in a different state. It can't grow to the northeast because of the aforementioned Ponca Hills. And most people think that it probably really won't grow past the Elkhorn River, because once you go on the other side of the Elkhorn River, it's a completely different watershed. Much of it happens to be in the floodplain. So in order to keep Omaha proper strong, we need more people on those existing square miles, on those existing acres. So I think you're going to see a lot of momentum for streetcars and orbit lines for that reason too. More people per acre, more people per square mile in the already established parts of the city.
So I view that as kind of a tip for the people that are looking to future investments on where they should be looking at currently. Is there any other tips that you have for the group of areas that are potentially coming up soon that you see developments going on down the road that'd be a good place for people to start buying investment properties in those areas, single families predominantly?
Yeah, I think anywhere that's in or near the urban core. So the urban core is actually a designated area. I don't know the exact streets, but it goes out to, I'm thinking about 50th Street or something like that. And it goes south to, maybe a little bit south of Leavenworth. And I think it goes north to, Seward or something like that. Don't quote me on those boundaries, but that's generally what it is. And the city of Omaha, the real estate development community, Greater Omaha Chamber, and the people in that crowd are really, really pushing heavy, intense development in that area for a lot of the aforementioned reasons. And I think you will see land values and building values continue to grow exponentially. Again, the Med Center thing is in that area, right? One of the things that the Urban Core Committee did, and there's this very well-established Urban Core Committee. It's led by Jay Noddle, who is the CEO of Noddle Companies, probably Omaha's most prolific and best-known real estate developer, so it's got some serious heavyweight gravitas behind it. But one of the things that really jumped out in the Urban Core report that the Urban Core Committee came up with was the shocking number of surface parking lots in the core. A lot of people bitch and moan about, you can't find parking if you go downtown. There's actually more parking stalls than there are workers downtown. It's just that they're spread out in places where you might not necessarily want to be at a given time. So the idea with the streetcar is you can concentrate parking in some major garages and nodes, then fill up all those worthless, non-tax generating surface lots with 8-story buildings, right, that have shops on the ground level and people living upstairs. So the public transit stuff that Ted was talking about will make all of that more likely. And we've got another question asker.
How about the Gretna Lake? And then my other question is your sources for everything. How do you keep up with it all? Just have you built that network? So first of all, the Gretna Lake, and then the sources of how you do everything. I
love both those questions. The Gretna Lake, God, that would be so cool. Some of you maybe have seen renderings of it. It is an idea that would be funded in part by some of the government money that Nebraska received because of the pandemic. And the plans call for a 7-mile-long lake that would be just east of the Platte River, down the bluff from Gretna and Elkhorn. And I hope it happens. I've always thought we have a handful of big-time weaknesses when it comes to attracting people in the Omaha area. One of those weaknesses is the weather. Can't do anything about that. The other weakness, well, there's a few of them, but one of them would be a major recreational lake, where you could do the big-time lake stuff. And that would solve that problem, but it's right along the Platte River. And the environmental lobby is very, very powerful anywhere, but the Platte River is environmentally kind of maybe more sacred than almost anything else in our state. So gosh, even though they wouldn't dam it, they wouldn't be damming the river, they would be using groundwater because the water table is so high right by the river, right? So it's cool that way, but I guess I'm just a little skeptical as to whether they can pull it off. But man, I'm hoping they do, because it would be such a big benefit for what we're trying to do here in the city. The other question, how do we get our information? Well, a couple things. My partner and I in this business, and my co-host on the radio show, we both work with a commercial real estate firm, so we have access to all those real estate agents and all the other agents that do business with our agents. And then over the last 20 years, we've just kind of done a lot of subversive underground tunneling with connections to this person and that person. And we've got a group of about 30 or 40 people that feed us information who have proven over the years to be reliable sources. And so we kind of work them. And then some of it is, I was telling someone before the meeting, once a week, if I'm in town, I go drive around for a few hours and try and catch up with what's going on, just look with my own eyes. And we got a couple interns that do some bird dogging for us, so it all comes together. All right, we got another person.
3 topics or questions. So Sunset Hills Golf Course, any updates on that? Retail space being converted to apartments, any, I guess, with Omaha, any objections to that? Are that going to happen? And joking but seriously, with all this development around Dodge, are they ever going to redo Dodge Street and make it to actually so we don't have these old 1970s hanging lights and things like that? So
Okay, the first question, the Sunset Hills Golf Course, that land was actually purchased by the Dodge family, which owns NP Dodge, where I am affiliated. And last I heard, that's just kind of on hold. There was heavy opposition to the plans for some multifamily there. And so last I heard, I don't frankly talk to the owners of the company very often, last I heard that's on hold, and I don't know if there are any immediate plans. Second question was the retail question. In some cities you are seeing, are you talking about like dead retail space being? Yeah. I don't think you're going to see apartments here because our retail vacancy in Omaha is actually low compared to most other cities. And instead in Omaha, because the economy is so vibrant and diverse and active right now, I think you will continue to see more non-traditional uses for retail space that are not residential. So urban air going into a former bag and save, climate-controlled self-storage, churches love retail space, entertainment-oriented stuff, and retail. Retail's not going away. I think the reports of retail's demise are very, very premature. You have new retail concepts that are brewing, that are being tested. I wouldn't have any hesitation. I don't give out investment advice, but I wouldn't have any hesitation whatsoever owning retail space on a good corridor in Omaha. I don't think we're going to have to resort to turning it into multifamily space. And then your third question, Dodge, I don't think you have room to expand it. So I think the way you're going to manage the traffic on there is probably more and more public transit. Now, what were you talking about, the lights from the 1970s? Yeah. I think you will see east of 90th Street, Dodge will continue to become more and more urbanized and dense. It'll seem like 20 years from now, it'll probably feel like a linear extension of downtown. It'll be kind of like a long downtown. Once you get past 90th Street, it is expandable. Yeah. And that's the freeway. Yeah. Yeah. Saddle Creek to downtown. Yeah, I think you'll see more and more urbanization. There's a 5 or 6 story apartment building that's going to go on at 38th Avenue in Dodge, right up to the street. So I think you'll see more and more buildings built right up to the street, no setbacks. So it'll have more of that downtown feel, and that feeling will go all the way out till about Children's Hospital. I think you will eventually see most of it as just like a line of downtown, which I think will look kind of cool. Okay. How are we doing on time, Ted? Do we have time for more questions, or are we done?
We can